Number 10. Tupolev Tu-144. Kazan, located in the southwestern part of the country, is Russia's fifth largest city. Its outskirts are home to an abandoned Soviet supersonic jet known as the Tupolev Tu-144. Aerial images of the deserted aircraft have gone viral online, but nobody seems to know the full story behind why the vehicle ended up where it is. During the 1960s, the Tu-144 earned the distinction of being the world's first supersonic passenger jet. The prototype took its maiden flight in 1968 and first went supersonic the following year. In 1970, the Tu-144 became the first commercial transport aircraft to exceed Mach 2, or twice the speed of sound. Unfortunately, the plane's viability was limited by a whole slew of obstacles, reliability and developmental issues, rising fuel price, and a damaged reputation resulting from a catastrophic crash at the 1973 Paris Air Show. The Tu-144 ultimately lost out to the British and French-made Concorde supersonic jet, which provided passenger service from 1976 until 2003. Number 9. An 18th century cemetery. In 2011, Vincent Marcello decided to dig a hole for a swimming pool in the backyard of his home in the French Quarter of New Orleans. But things took an unexpected turn when workers unearthed 13 caskets full of human remains, all stacked one on top of another. It soon came to light that the property used to be known as St. Peter Cemetery and had been shut down for quite some time. Marcello did not expect to find human remains despite knowing that his property has historic ties. But he went into the project with a somewhat open mind, stating, "We didn't exactly know what we were going to find. This is the French Quarter, no telling what's underground." When Marcello realized that the site was an old burial plot, he asked archaeologist Ryan Gray from the University of New Orleans for help. According to Gray, the cemetery had been closed due to overcrowding, and it was revealed through historical accounts and complaints that it had become impossible to dig without hitting previously buried remains. When St. Peter's was closed, wealthier families probably paid to have their deceased loved ones relocated to another cemetery known as St. Louis Cemetery No. 1. People who didn't have a lot of money, on the other hand, left their relatives' remains in the French Quarter. Marcello took the incident with a grain of salt, stating it's all part of New Orleans culture. Number 8. An airplane restaurant. Located roughly an hour outside of Venice, the small Italian town of Via Maranza is home to around 1,200 people and 2 abandoned airplanes that once housed a restaurant called Michelangelo da Vinci. The odd construction was the brainchild of a man named Gigi Stecca, who wanted to provide elderly locals with the opportunity to step foot on an airplane. Many of Via Maranza's old-timers had never flown and had no plans to. Stecca realized at his job as a retirement home manager when he noticed that residents often gazed at the sky in fascination whenever an airplane passed overhead. Knowing they may not otherwise ever get the chance to board a plane, he rolled a Douglas DC-6 and a Tupolev Tu-134A into town and decked them out with sculptures, frescoes, and replicas of famous Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo masterpieces. He also installed a swimming pool outside. The restaurant opened its doors in 2000. It offered large pizzas and a wide selection of beers that were served in custom glasses designed by Stecca. Diners had a large variety of foods to choose from that beat typical airliner cuisine, including sandwiches, bruschetta, nightly fish specials, and homemade desserts. There was a disco every Saturday and live music on Sundays. By all appearances, Michelangelo da Vinci had a good reputation. Customers enjoyed the food, entertainment, and atmosphere, and they praised the friendly service. But the restaurant shut its doors in 2014 following a series of conflicts with the local government over alleged zoning violations. The planes are still there, attracting urban explorers instead of restaurant visitors. Without the regular maintenance they would be receiving if Stecca's restaurant was still in business, they've started to decay and have become somewhat of an eyesore with a dust-covered and litter-strewn interior. Number 7. A loaded hunting rifle and a few other things. How would you like to walk through a part of your yard that you rarely go through in the first place, only to discover a pillowcase containing a loaded hunting rifle and a cell phone? That's exactly what happened to one man in the northeastern part of Calgary, Canada in late August 2014. The disturbing discovery was made one afternoon between the man's garage and a fence, a small area that, as I said, he didn't normally walk through. He unloaded the gun before calling authorities, who typically advise people who stumble upon a loaded gun to not even touch the weapon. Police opened an investigation, but the origins of the strange items and how they got where they were found remains a mystery to this day. What do you think they were used for? Let us know in the comments below, but first, be sure to subscribe. Number 6. Live explosives. In 2020, a Saratoga, California homeowner unearthed a pair of live, rusty grenades and an artillery shell while digging a trench for a sprinkler system in his backyard. He immediately contacted the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office, which dispatched its bomb squad to the scene. The responding officers collected the disturbing materials and detonated the explosives at a remote location in nearby Congress Springs Park. These types of discoveries happen more often than many people realize. Just months later, landscapers in Pueblo, Colorado found potentially deadly World War II-era explosive in homeowner April Montoya's backyard. They placed the suspicious object on Montoya's front doorstep, and she even admittedly handled it a few times and joked about it resembling a torpedo. When she was unable to identify the item, she contacted authorities. The Pueblo Metro Bomb Squad and Fort Carson Explosive Ordnance Disposal Group responded to the scene, informed everyone at the property that the object was a live military explosive, and instructed them to leave. Fort Carson officials did not reveal what type of explosive the object was, but confirmed that they disposed of it. After learning that such a potentially dangerous item had ended up so close to her family and home, Montoya said she was grateful that her children and the landscapers were unharmed. Number 5. $150,000 in cash. 51-year-old Wayne Sabaj was picking broccoli outside his McHenry County, Ohio home one day in 2011 when he discovered two mysterious nylon bags with $150,000 cash inside them. He did the right thing and turned the money over to the police, even though he had fallen on hard times as an unemployed carpenter. The authorities told Sabaj that if the money remained unclaimed by the end of the year, he could have it. The man's 87-year-old neighbor, Dolores Johnson, was quick to try claiming the cash as her own. She argued that she'd gotten rid of the money because she believed it was cursed, and now, of course, she conveniently wanted it back. Several other people filed claim of ownership to the funds, including a local liquor store owner who said that he thought it could be the cash that was taken from his business during a robbery. Dolores Johnson passed away while the case made its way through court, and a judge split the cash between Johnson's daughter Diane Howe and Sabaj. Unfortunately, Sabaj passed away from diabetes-related health issues just 10 days before he was due to receive his payout. Maybe Johnson was right. Maybe the money really was cursed. Sabaj's portion of the prize was given to his son, Kevin. Number 4. A lost palace. At 81 years old, Robert Pole decided to downsize by building a bungalow next to his house in Wivelscombe, England. He planned to move into the bungalow once it was finished and sell the home. Shortly after starting the job, the construction crew found the remains of ancient wall foundations and floors buried in Mr. Pole's backyard. Experts believe that the medieval ruins may be a part of a lost 13th century structure known as Bishop's Palace. The property is detailed in historical records, but until the discovery in Pole's yard, experts had only managed to find a 14th century gate which stands near the ruins. Scholars have struggled to pinpoint the exact location of the site's various buildings. They originally thought that the complex was east of Pole's property, according to Somerset County archaeologist Bob Croft, who spoke with BBC News. This was the first time experts have uncovered physical evidence of the palace, which was built as a hunting retreat for the Bishop of Bath and Wells sometime after 1256. By the 18th century, it was long neglected and had fallen into ruins. It continued to crumble and was eventually no longer recognizable as a palace. Stones from the buildings were likely reused in newer construction projects, and this only caused the site to fall further into obscurity. An archaeological team is currently working to preserve the structure. As exciting as the discovery is, Mr. Pole seemed pretty exacerbated by the whole ordeal. He told the press that the unforeseen discovery was costing him a pretty penny and delaying the construction of his bungalow. Number 3. Stolen sports car. According to one famous urban legend, a group of kids were digging in the mud outside of a Los Angeles home in 1978 when they struck what looked and felt like the roof of an old car. They flagged down a sheriff's deputy and a digging team was summoned to the property. Soon enough, a metallic green Dyno 264 GTS Ferrari was being pulled up from the ground. The discovery made the front page of the Los Angeles Times, which reported that the car was in shockingly good condition. Other than a hole over the right taillight, there appeared to be no visible damage. Photos from the scene have circulated for decades as the case continues to fascinate people. The car's owner, Rosendo Cruz, had reported it stolen in 1974, 4 years before police dug it up. But the case went cold from there as law enforcement struggled to figure out how and why it ended up buried in someone's yard. In 2012, Jalopnik writer Mike Spinelli contacted Dennis Carroll, one of the original detectives that worked the case. Carroll told Spinelli that a tipster had told investigators about the buried car's existence and whereabouts. Detectives concocted the story about a group of unsuspecting children discovering the vehicle as a way of concealing the informant's identity. And as it turned out, the car wasn't stolen after all. The tipster told law enforcement that Cruz had hired some co-conspirators to stage the crime so he could collect on the insurance. But police were unable to prove these claims and Cruz was never charged with any crimes. The Ferrari was given to the insurance company that handled the original theft claim, and it was soon discovered that the car was in worse shape than it had seemed like at first. In fact, its condition was disastrous. The body was rusted out, and the damage had spread to the leather seats because whoever buried the car forgot to roll up the windows first. A young mechanic bought the Ferrari at auction and restored it to perfect condition. Nobody knows what happened to it after that, but many believe that it's still out there somewhere, perhaps in the possession of a classic car enthusiast. Number 2. Buried headstones. Seattle is a somewhat young city, so its archaeological record isn't nearly as rich as it might be in a place like London or Paris. But it too has its fair share of fascinating finds. Every year, 2 or 3 headstones are found on a homeowner's property. Local resident Brian Vaughn first dug up a chunk of someone's grave marker around 20 years ago while working in his garden. It seemed like a fairly normal discovery at first, but Vaughn kept turning up more and more headstone fragments. He eventually learned that they had been used as fill, and he didn't feel right throwing them away, so he repurposed them as doorstops for his greenhouse and shed. It turns out that the concrete chunks came from temporary grave markers, which were used until a permanent headstone was installed at someone's grave. This, according to state anthropologist Guy Tassa, who spoke with CBC about Vaughn's unique finds. He pointed out that it was actually a bit unusual that they were used for fill. Even more oddly, the names and details on the headstones don't match up with the state's vital statistics records. There may be spelling errors or inaccurate birth or death dates on the stones, which would explain why the information can't be matched with official documents. Vaughn recently found his first complete headstone while rototilling. It belonged to someone named Andrew Olson, and he's not quite sure what to do with it, so for now it's sitting in his yard. Who knows what else Vaughn might find in his backyard? It seems like the discoveries are endless. Number 1. Largest ever Anglo-Saxon coin hoard. While metal detecting outside his East Norfolk, England home in 1990, an amateur treasure hunter found an old coin. Over the next 30 years, he amassed 131 of the pieces, amounting to what's being described as the largest ever Anglo-Saxon coin hoard ever discovered. It rivals the size of the famous Sutton Hoo hoard, which has more gold but fewer coins. Most of the coins are Frankish tremisses dating between 580 and 630 AD. The collection also consists of 9 larger Roman coins called solidi, as well as some gold jewelry and pendants. Experts have already learned some things they didn't know before about early 7th century trade in the region. For example, the hoard shows that coins from outside the area were used before currency started being minted locally. A coroner is examining the artifacts to determine if they qualify as treasure under the Treasure Act. This designation would automatically hand ownership of the hoard over to the Crown to ensure that the items are kept off the black market and made available for the public to enjoy. Anything that's over 300 years old and made from more than 10% precious metals usually falls into this category. Thanks for watching. Have you ever found something strange in your backyard? Tell us about it in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time for another amazing video right here on American Eye.